They locked him away because he remembered too much, because he knew the truth, because he was the last thread connecting the past to the fire the empire couldn't kill. And what they didn't know was that one day the grandson would come knocking. The grandson of the very man he once protected with his life. The day had come, and nothing would ever be the same again. The sun blazed hard on the cracked road, leading to the outskirts of Ouagadougou, where an old psychiatric facility stood forgotten. By time and policy, a relic from an era when madness was convenient and inconvenient, minds were declared unfit for society. President Ibrahim Traoré didn't visit such places for ceremony. There were no cameras, no press, just a quiet presidential escort and his own uneasy curiosity. The place reeked of dust, disinfectant, and silence. But as he passed the rusting gates, something in his bones stirred an echo, a pull he couldn't ignore. A moment later, one of the facility's doctors handed him a file sealed years ago, flagged with warnings, political sensitivity, and internal suppression. The name on it was Issa Diallo. No date of birth, no family, no visitors, no record of a crime. Just a single stamp in red. Dangerous to whom, to what? Traore flipped through the faded pages and felt his heartbeat lurch. There were notes in the margins, handwriting he recognized from childhood letters. His grandfather once read out loud advice, filled with fire and clarity. It couldn't be good. He demanded to see the patient. The doctor hesitated, then led him down a dim corridor, past eyes that had long stopped hoping, until they reached a solitary cell. The man inside was old, skin like parchment, eyes like lightning, his posture straight as a soldier's despite the years of captivity. And when he saw Traore, he smiled, not with confusion, but with recognition, as if he had been waiting all along. "You have your grandfather's eyes," he said softly, and Traore felt the ground shift. Beneath him they talked for hours about things no one else remembered, about strategies, abandoned revolutions, aborted visions, crushed not by failure, but by betrayal. Issa Diallo had been the mind, the architect, the soul behind the elder Traoré's boldest moves. He had challenged the French embassy to its face, exposed networks of economic sabotage, and even written the land reforms that nearly returned Faso to its people. And that was exactly why he was silenced, declared insane by a panel of compromised doctors, signed off by officials who owed their seats to foreign embassies. Buried not in a grave, but in a cage, and left to rot. The betrayal was complete, and now it stared Ibrahim Traoré in the face, shaking but unbroken. The president ordered his immediate release, took him straight to the presidential palace, and demanded a full investigation within 72 hours. The truth surfaced like a curse. The signatures on the psychiatric order included a former vice president, 2 ministers, and a UN-backed health advisor, all still powerful, all still active, all with something to hide. The story was never supposed to come out, but it had, and the consequences would be volcanic. Traoré did not keep Diallo as a relic. He made him his personal advisor, and together they began to dig up the unfinished work of the grandfather, the files, the memos, the policies that had been laughed at or burned or buried, now came to life with terrifying speed. Land audits, resource maps, political dossiers, blacklists of those who had played both sides. The palace became a war room, and Diallo the quiet storm at its heart. Ministries began to panic, bureaucrats resigned, some fled the country. Media outlets scrambled to discredit the old man, but the people remembered the stories they had heard in whispers. And suddenly everything made sense. The assassinations, the coups, the foreign assistance. It had all been part of the same operation, to destroy any leader who dared to dream beyond dependency. And Diallo had survived it all. Ibrahim Traoré changed after that visit. His speeches grew sharper, his policies bolder. He no longer negotiated with those who sold out their soil. He confronted them live on air, called out their names, showed the bank transfers, and then turned to the people and said, "This is your enemy," not just in politics, but in history. And the people roared with understanding, because they had seen the chains, and now they saw who forged them. International backlash was immediate. Embassies called for dialogue, think tanks accused him of authoritarianism. But Traore kept moving like a storm with a compass every night. He and Diallo mapped the next blow, the next reform, the next truth to be unburied, and every morning the country woke to a new decree that pushed them further from colonial economics and closer to sovereignty. One by one, the ghosts of the past were being exorcised, and the ghost they had tried to bury in a cell had become the flame that lit the way the story spread like wildfire. Not just in Faso, but across Africa, young leaders came to seek counsel from the man who had defied an empire twice, once in silence, once in resurrection. And Issa Diallo told them the same thing: the truth is not dead, it is buried. And it is your duty to dig until your hands bleed. Traore knew now that he was not alone, and that he never had been the path he walked had once been paved in blood, but now it bore the weight of purpose and legacy, and every time he stood before the nation he could feel Diallo behind him, not as a ghost, but as a guardian. And every time an enemy plotted in the shadows, they felt it too, that the revolution had memory, and it remembered everything they had done, and now it was coming for them. Not with revenge, but with reckoning. What followed was a cascade of actions, rapid and relentless. With every passing week, more revelations surfaced: old records, hidden transcripts, photos of clandestine meetings between top Faso officials and foreign delegates came to light under Diallo's direction. A secret archive was uncovered beneath the former Ministry of Agriculture, containing maps detailing mineral reserves and communications between colonial administrators and local collaborators. Decades of hidden betrayal laid bare within weeks. Several retired officials were subpoenaed. Some arrested. Their testimonies confirmed what had long been suspected, that the nation's economic strangulation had been methodically orchestrated, and any leader who resisted was either exiled, bought off, or eliminated. But now the tide had turned, emboldened by truth and backed by the people's fury. Traore initiated a mass reform unlike anything Faso had seen before: agricultural independence, infrastructure development, nationalized resource extraction, and a new constitution written in native dialects that every citizen could understand. Diallo insisted on it. The law must speak the people's language. He said the people responded by marching in millions, their chants no longer begging for change, but demanding justice across cities. Murals of Traore and Diallo rose like flames on concrete. The palace became a fortress of ideas, a university of resistance. Delegations from other African nations began arriving, quietly, not for aid, but for advice. The revolution had become a blueprint, and its architects were alive and working day and night to protect it. Opposition didn't vanish, it grew more. Desperate covert attacks increased. Cyber sabotage, assassination plots. But the people had changed. They weren't just watching anymore. They were participating. Neighborhood watches, intelligence tips, civilian task forces. And Traore knew that as long as the people were awake, system could not fall asleep. He passed laws that criminalized economic treason, exposed shell companies, stripped foreign corporations of illegal holdings, and built community centers in areas once abandoned by the state. And all the while Issa Diallo sat in the corner of the war room, never raising his voice, only speaking when it mattered, reminding Traore not to rule like a king, but like a witness to his people's pain. And Traore listened, because he knew this moment was bigger than him. It was history correcting itself, and somewhere deep inside him, he felt his grandfather's presence, no longer distant, but fulfilled. Finally, the revolution was breathing, and this time, no one would suffocate it again.